The manga has the villains made mostly as manifestations of chaos. They aren't really written to be that much compelling.
The manga has some villains as manifestations of chaos, but not each individual antagonist is meant to be that. Such as the mind-controlled good guys turned bad guys. How are they manifestations of chaos when they're objectively good guys under evil influence? What about Galaxia and the Sailor Animates? None of them are manifestations of chaos, clearly. How's chaos gonna double-cross itself? Beef? For real, honey. And just look at Naoko's little notes next to her pure evil characters. They're still supposed to be characters. What do you know? It's almost as if the whole manifestations of chaos thing is a bullshit excuse for bad writing and a last-minute retcon Naoko thought of around the end of the series.
But what they lack on villains, they excel in character backgrounds, management of seriousness and tragedy, deepness and psychological analysis for everyone's conflict.
Again, this is incorrect. The character backgrounds are not used in any meaningful way to develop the characters. Setsuna's crush of Endymion isn't something she has to deal with when she's reborn into the present time and standing right next to him. Hotaru losing her father twice doesn't matter to her going forward. The loss of her entire life and home, having to adjust to 3 maternal figures instead of a single father, isn't touched on either. Rei's little pendant she got from her mother doesn't mean anything for her character in the actual story. The latch on it breaks when Mercury and Jupiter die in the Stars arc, but she doesn't react in a way that proves the pendant holds sentimental significance. It stops appearing on her Sailor Fuku entirely after the 3rd arc, and it never appears on her Fuku in Crystal. Wow, look at all that deep meaning and psychological analysis. Glad we have the pendant in the manga, when Naoko actually remembers to draw it, instead of the detailed and meaningful relationship Rei has with her grandfather in Classic. Despite their personalities clashing, they share a deep and loving relationship, one that both of them benefit from immensely. His parenting method for Rei has made her into the woman she is when we meet her. Strong, confident, wise beyond her years, and with a passionate drive for life. He's protective of Rei and doesn't want her even thinking about marriage yet. She's embarrassed and frustrated with his lecherous antics, but despite her lamenting him taking in part-timers from off the street, she's glad he allowed Yuichiro to take a permanent spot at the shrine to help them out. He's happy and proud to have her as his heir and daughter. He even cheers her on at school functions. She is protective of him as her only relative and her longtime caretaker. She won't stand for anyone accusing him of actual crimes. Her rage when he gets injured during an altercation with an enemy unlocks a new powerful ability for her. He taught her everything she knows about divination and trained her in mastering her supernatural powers and physical abilities before she ever knew she was a Sailor Senshi. His love for her temporarily keeps him from hurting her when he becomes the great Yoma Jiji. Her love for him makes it impossible for her to fight him directly, and she uses another way to stop him. And when he's restored to normal, Rei cradles his body and cries in relief that she's got her grandfather back, because no matter how strongly they disagree with each other, neither hesitates to protect the other from danger. They are the only family each other have, and they cherish that bond above all else. Nah, son, we don't need that weak shit, cause we got Pendant, baby! Ami, having largely absent parents, does not meaningfully come out as a conflict for her in the actual story. The Dream arc is the only arc where her parents' divorce is a thing she has to deal with or affects her in any way. It's 1 chapter / 1 scene, and it never comes up again. Yes, including Bearthair fucking around with her during the chess match. That doesn't count because that's a Crystal edition. This person is defending the manga right now, so we gotta ignore that. Something as monumental as a teenager dealing with divorce, absent parents, her mother replacing her father with someone else, parental resentment, all of it is ignored. All of these juicy, dramatic, and poignant story beats are rushed through faster than a fat ass at a hot dog eating contest. They're just stated point blank, and then Amiya's like, oh yeah, but I have friends though, so that means none of this stuff matters anymore, lol. And then she transforms and breaks out of Fisheye illusion, and then Sailor Moon and Chibi Moon show up out of nowhere to actually defeat Fisheye, because allowing her to have a victory in the last 2 arcs of the series is a cardinal sin apparently, and then it stops stops being about Ami and shifts to Chibiusa having a crisis about Pegasus not needing her, blah 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 blah, on with the plot. Ami's entire home life and parental strife is forgotten by the story and is never brought up again, which is insulting not only to Ami and the audience, but it's insulting to the children who actually went through or are currently going through similar situations. Situations that the story has disrespected by trivializing their struggle, and worse, chastising them for not being able to easily get over such massive problems with the lightest of ease like Ami does, by remembering she has friends. Friends who know nothing about her home life and never find out, so they can't ever help her handle these problems. How inspiring. And you can apply that same flippant disrespect of serious subject matter to every Senshi's one scene per arc in the manga. It's all about lip service to depth, saying a thing exists, but never focusing on it long enough to actually give it weight and gravity and make it a real part of a character's journey. You know, the thing that makes it part of an ongoing story. That's how meaning and development comes about with these character backgrounds. Just mentioning them a few times and speeding right along with a plot that has nothing to do with those backgrounds is a failure on the writer's part. Mako's boy craziness isn't portrayed any differently than Minako's boy craziness. They're virtually identical, as is the other non-main characters that are boy crazy over whatever guy that happens by. Mako was rejected by her crush, and that's supposed to be a deep wound on her heart, but we never get to see the pain of that wound in the actual story. She never brings up the boy who broke her heart in an important way after her introductory chapter. She just rolls along like every other Senshi and makes hard eyes at the cute boys. Minako doesn't have the same wound that Mako has, so why are they identical in this? Because Naoko doesn't actually know what to do with this background detail of Mako's character, so she can't use it to insert meaning and development in the story. She just staples it to the character as a little trivia fact, and we rocket forward with the main plot line. After her debut chapter, Mako never makes mention of her first crush when she starts crushing on another boy. She doesn't compare others to him. She doesn't relive falling in love with him for the first time. She doesn't get nervous or self-conscious thinking about him rejecting her. She doesn't use her experience with him to give romantic advice to other characters, because it doesn't truly matter to the story. Because Mako being a full-fledged character doesn't matter to the story. She just needs to be around so the Sailor Senshi can all be present for the plot events to happen, and when we circle back to her for that one scene per arc rotation, we'll focus on an entirely different background detail of hers, instead of further developing the background details we're already aware of. And when we do get her turn in the obligatory one scene per arc rotation, she may mention him in passing, and then move along with the plot of the chapter. Blink and you miss it. No joke, she mentions her senpai all of 3 times after her debut chapter, and all 3 instances are in the same chapter of the Infinity arc. None of the references are plot relevant, nor inform her character at all, because it's not about her relationship with her senpai. It's not about the trauma that rejection did to her. It's not about any aspect of character this backstory can give her. Same with her parents' tragic and violent death in a plane crash. It doesn't matter for her character. It should, but it doesn't. It informs a trivia fact about her having a fear of flying, which, as it turns out, only applies to flying in an airplane specifically. She doesn't have a fear of heights and ends up having to fight someone high up, a standard narrative payoff to such a background detail. No, it's just a little trivia factoid about her. And I know the manga stans are clamoring on their keyboard about to educate me on Mako's one chapter in the Dream arc where she says she's all domestic and shit because her parents died in a plane crash. But that, my dear mouth breathers, is an example of poorly writing character backgrounds into the story. The reason why I can see that scene or chapter as inconsequential is because it doesn't improve the writing whatsoever. Having your character just state point blank after 2 arcs of nothing, "Hey, this is my motivation, by the way," is unbelievable. And anyone who writes that should be embarrassed of that trash. It's not just about what the story tells you, it's how the story tells you this stuff. That's what storytelling is. The writing methods and techniques that the writer uses to relay the story to the audience. If Hannibal Lecter sat Clarice down and she explained her entire motivation to him randomly in the middle of the movie, Silence of the Lambs would be a dog shit film. Instead, they have an exchange of information where Hannibal Lecter keeps all his cards close to the vest and forces Clarice to reveal extremely personal and damaging details of her life to him, unwittingly giving him more ammunition to further manipulate and torment her psychologically. That's how you use expositional character backgrounds properly. Meanwhile, the manga has Mako not mention her parents for the entire first arc, mention completely randomly and without provocation that they died in a plane crash, teehee heart emoji, then fail to mention them again in the third arc, but suddenly she just front loads her character motivation regarding them in the fourth arc, which is only relevant for a couple pages and then on with the main plot that has nothing to do with Mako's characterization or backstory whatsoever. Yeah, really stellar writing there. I'm glad Mako read us the notes on her f***ing character sheet 4 arcs into the story. Fantastic work, manga. You're so good at this whole writing thing. That's all we get on Mako's parents dying in a horrific plane crash and traumatizing her while simultaneously orphaning her. No character or plot relevance, just a little blurb Naoko can put next to her concept art and have Mako read it out when it's her 1 chapter per arc, and trick neophytes into thinking even a scrap of character work has been accomplished for her. Let's be clear, bullet points next to a character sheet is not depth. Please stop. Characters mentioning in passing certain details of their lives that don't matter to the events in the present story is not depth. Please stop. There is no real depth of the psychological conflict these characters go through. You're just making stuff up. This ain't Evangelion where the psychological trauma of the characters is what drives the goddamn story. And it certainly isn't season 1 of Arcane where the psychological trauma is expertly built up, clearly shown at every possible turn, develops even further due to the events of the story, and culminates in some of the greatest payoffs in the entire story. You want to talk about depth of psychological conflicts? Let's have these be the standard and compare them to my parents died in a plane crash, lol, that's it for this arc and the next arc, but stay tuned, all of this just might have relevance eventually, only not really. Usagi gets all depressed and sad when Mamoru is taken from her, she's sad when her friends get taken from her, she tries to go into denial about stuff in the Stars arc, but again, this is not depth. This is surface level at best, and it's ridiculously contradictive at worst. She's had all her friends die or get taken from her before now. Twice, in fact. The first was against Metalia, where everyone but Mamoru died, but even then she thought he was dead. The second was against the Black Moon clan, where everyone except Minako and Mamoru was thought to be captured and being tortured to death in the future. She didn't give up fighting evil in those scenarios, when it was more reasonable for her to do so because of her inexperience in dealing with this level of stress and trauma. She still fought the bad guys, protected the planet and or galaxy full of innocents, and did her job as a hero. But when we get to Stars and everybody dies again, she breaks down, goes into denial, and gets mega depressed. And all I can ask is,
but why though?
This is not how she handled this exact traumatic experience the 2 times we went through them before. 3.5 times for Mamoru, if we're including Endymion's first death during the Silver Millennium, and the magic lung cancer thing from Eternal being the half. He wasn't dead, but he was slowly dying before her eyes, and she couldn't stop it for whatever reason. That's never made clear, actually. I mean, she never once tries to use the silver crystal to heal him or break the curse when it's literally healed people from death before, and I'm getting off topic. So sure, Usagi is the big sad and traumatized in the Stars arc, but it's after she went through the same trauma twice and thrice before, without being nearly as traumatized, which makes it contradictive and stupid. I don't see how this qualifies qualifies as good writing. I don't. The entire first half of the Stars arc is a waste of fucking time because Usagi wouldn't just freeze and go into denial like this when she could go and get her people back or get sweet revenge on the villains. This doesn't make any fucking sense. I don't give a shit about how people simp over her psychological trauma because she shouldn't have any in the first place. No other main character, let alone side character, gets much attention at all to their mental state and how they handle their trauma. Not much. They may get a line or two in passing or a single poorly constructed scene like Ami and Mako in the Dream arc. It's not well written and it's rushed past, which is a childish way to portray psychological trauma, which is the real point of contention here. The inclusion of a trope or acknowledgement of a tragic backstory's existence is not the same as handling the topic with care, intelligence, and nuance. And that's a distinction this genius apparently has yet to understand. This ain't Revolutionary Girl Utena where everybody gets ample time in the story to develop their psychological issues, and the way in which we are shown those psychological issues play out in the story as well-written and consistent plot points. No, this is certainly not that. Having a character just state point blank how they feel at any given moment is not depth. It's the definition of tell, don't show, which is bad writing in case you weren't following.
You can't just have your characters announce how they feel. That makes me feel angry.
The manga has no conflict in exposing seriousness, and that's a complete mirror of the anime. It's way deeper and compelling than anything else, so never underestimate it.
No.
The manga is not a mirror of the anime. It exposes seriousness in the same way a sweat-drenched obese flasher exposes their grotesque naked body to innocent people in public. It inflicts horrific damage to the psyche that can never be undone and is a tragic waste of everyone's time. You can believe these lies all you want, but don't try to sell them to me as fact. Once again, I ask whoever disagrees with me to really look at the manga itself and see how much you actually know about each character, but most importantly, how the story delivers this information to you. If it just tells you point blank what these characters think and feel, that doesn't count as depth or good writing. If you're relying on bullet points given to you from side material of the actual story itself, that ain't depth or good writing either. It has to be in the story, and it has to matter in the story, and it has to be written with a degree of finesse and intelligence. Anything less than this is not supporting the idea of depth or quality writing. Again, Utena handles this infinitely better, as well as Evangelion, Cowboy Bebop, Arcane Season 1, and Full Metal Alchemist. Please expand your horizons and get better standards for storytelling, madam.